John DeSando.
Classics, let's go to the movies and share some popcorn, soda pop with our friends. Turn off our cell phones and get away. Night or day, it's John DeSando on the radio. We'll watch the credits from our patio.
It's Movie Time. It's produced and hosted by John DeSando. Listen to shows and read reviews online at WCBE.org.
I'm John DeSando,
And I'm G Kline.
and this is It's Movie Time. And I'm feeling so much better, Ken, because 4 months into the year, I finally found a movie I can brag about.
I completely agree. Wow, what a movie A24 has just given us. Of course, we're talking about Civil War.
Yeah.
Civil War, the biggest film ever in A24 Studios history. $50 million budget. And it is doing gangbusters at
Is that all the budget was?
All $50 million.
It's pretty spare when you think about it.
Yeah, I mean, it's compared to a Marvel movie, that's nothing. That buys you 10 minutes of Robert Downey Jr. But
It's not Jerry Bruckheimer.
No. But I'll tell you, but for a studio that's used to producing $15-20 million movies, a $50 million movie is quite an investment, and they could easily have taken a hit if this movie had not turned out to be the hit that it is.
All right, Ken, now a thumbnail of what Civil War is about.
Well, before we say what it's about, let's start by telling our audience what it is not about. Because there seems to be a lot of misunderstanding about this movie from people going in expecting it to be one kind of movie and then finding out it is not. This is not a movie about liberals versus Democrats. This is not, or liberals versus Republicans. This is not a movie about blue states versus red states going to war with each other. This is not a movie where it's going to validate your political views by showing your party militarily defeating the other party and laying waste to the country and taking over.
Well, let me add to yours by saying I think the palette here is a mix of red and blue. In other words, I think it comes from anywhere. It's got elements of both sides. If that's what they're hoping for, you're absolutely right. You're not going to get it pure, but there are elements within it that you could identify your left or your right.
There are. Director Alex Garland was very careful to balance that tightrope of not trying to tell us too much.
Yes.
We don't know what the political affiliations of either side in this Civil War really are.
Sure.
We know that there's a 3-term president who has defunded and disbanded the FBI to protect himself. We know that he has bombed American citizens. We know there was an Antifa massacre. We know that he has turned Washington, D.C. into a citadel, a fortress, and that there hasn't been any journalists in to interview him in many years. But what you need to be aware of is this is not a movie about one political side fighting the other. This is a movie about 4 journalists on the last days of the Civil War, trying to get to Washington on the back roads so they can get one last interview with this president before he is deposed.
Yeah, and you know, I can't remember the specific titles, and you probably could, about movies that have had journalists and photojournalists.
Well, you've got Private War, Welcome to Sarajevo are the 2 that immediately come to mind.
But you know what, in all of those, I've never felt as close to the action as I have in this one.
No, and that's because the other ones really try to depict a real story about a real photojournalist or a real war correspondent, so they're really telling more of a documentary story. This, of course, is more like a science fiction movie. It is about these 4 journalists, 3 journalists who are very, very tired, they're beaten, they're holed up in New York, they know the final days of the war are coming, they can read the tea leaves, they've been around the block, and they're like moths to the flame, they're drawn to this last mission.
They're jaded, and I think I've never seen Kirsten Dunst do so well as
yes.
she gets done in this.
She seems so tired and so weary.
It's
and just
wonderful.
All joy in life has been drained from her.
Why wouldn't you be?
Yeah.
When you look at what Garland depicts for us.
And we see some of it. We see the executions that she's seen and the horrific things that she's had to report.
And you know, as you express it, it could almost seem hyperbole, but yet when you're sitting in a theater, you feel like you're right behind her. She's behind the soldiers, and you're right behind her.
You do, you do.
Or I'm like the little ingenue.
Oh, yes,
uh,
Kaylee Spaney.
Right.
Yes, and showing us that she is capable of much better work than what we saw in Priscilla.
And oh yes, and she's an artist as well as an aspiring journalist.
She's an aspiring young photographer. She's got her old Nikon FE 35mm
Oh, it's
camera.
terrific.
And she has convinced these three to let her tag along. And of course, most of this movie is really about her. We're seeing this movie through her eyes as she experiences for the first time the things that have brought everybody else to this point in their lives.
Yeah.
She's aspiring to be Kirsten Dunst's character, who at that moment in Kirsten Dunst's life is so weary of being that person.
I think one of the expressions that is repeated here is so graphic for me when they talk more than once about what if the other was shot or killed,
Yeah.
and what would they do? They'd take the photo.
They would take the photo.
Wow, I said to myself, wow, that is hardcore. That's professional, that's detached.
We see the gritty side of war correspondence. We see the fact that they're not there to support one side or the other. They are merely there as objective observers to create the photos and the story that is up to the readers, to us, to interpret however we will.
Oh, yeah. As they travel, and I think particularly from West Virginia to DC,
Yeah.
they encounter a few bad boys.
Yeah.
And there is one scene, and I don't know if I should spoil it for people or not, but it's the one where they meet that camp of people, and they're standing in front of the no-name soldier who's asking them what American.
Oh, they run into a typical Alex Garland. We don't know what side the soldier on. For all we know, this soldier might be some local who's just put on fatigues
Yeah.
and decided to exploit the situation. But he is there with his assault rifle and his partner, and they're next to a pit. And he is asking them questions about what side are you on and who are you?
Can talk about a Holocaust image.
Oh, horrible.
The truck.
Yeah.
Holy
Yeah,
goodness,
horrible.
what an amazing depiction. And this, do we dare reveal who this person is? Because he's not listed in the cast.
I wouldn't. I'm going to save it for the audience
All
to
right,
go out and see
okay.
it, but I do want to say
I'm
that
dying to tell them because I think it's ingenious.
there is a warning here. There is more executions in this movie than I've ever seen
Yeah.
in any other movie. Alex Garland has never been one to shy away from violence. This
Oh.
is the fellow who brought us 28 Days Later. That was his very first film. Then, of course, he's brought us Ex Machina, and he brought us Annihilation.
Yeah.
He is a person.
We'll talk about him in our podcast.
Yes.
Do that, yeah.
But one thing that you might find frustrating about this movie, but is very characteristic of Alex Garland, and I find very refreshing, is that he doesn't do a lot of exposition. These characters are not explaining things to us. It's not like a Marvel movie where they have to tell you every single detail for fear that you don't understand something. You just get little snippets from the very normal conversations they're having, and you have to piece together what has brought the country to this point in time.
And if I'm right, Ken, and you're talking about the multiple executions, they don't hit you as the grisly, gory things that you would have expected. Garland is so careful of the way he depicts it. You rarely see any blood, because I think Garland respects us and says, "You guys know what this would look like."
He's not trying to turn this into a gory horror
No,
film.
he's not.
No.
He says, "You get the idea? Boy, you sure do." You know, they ask a question, doesn't like the answer, execution.
But the point you need to know is this is a journey film. This is a film that holds its history back to Homer's Odyssey. This is a movie that is like Saving Private Ryan or Cormac McCarthy's The Road. This is a movie about the experience that these people are on and how they learn from it, not about the war or about the final destination.
It's funny because you picked you alluded to a couple of my favorite pieces. The Odyssey, of course.
The Odyssey, yes.
And the Cormac McCarthy stuff is so like Garland.
Yes.
It's so expressive and so lean and so gray and so prophetic. Yes, it's an excellent choice. Now I have one that we could talk about My reference is,
Okay.
and what makes me think, and this is gonna be out, a little bit out, Birth of a Nation.
Okay, I can see that, yeah.
And I'm saying it because I think people who saw Birth of a Nation were probably either confused or were certain it was their side that was being extolled here. That is, once you think about it, it's of course not a happy business, but a birth of a nation. And when you see that who's involved, and anyway, there's a whole bunch of things being thrown in there so that any side could appreciate it. But what it comes out is as a classic.
Oh, yes.
Yeah,
And I think this film will be remembered.
oh,
It may be not to the same level as Saving Private Ryan, but I think, to my money, this is a better film than The Road.
yes, and for me, and I've told you what my tagline is, this is a masterpiece of pop apocalypse.
I like that. I'll counter that with my tagline, leave your politics at home.
All right, people are gonna have to tune in to podcast and to Back Talk. They have to go to WCBE, the podcast experience. If you wanna hear about more, you'll wanna hear more from Ken. But I'll be here to make sure that it all happens. I'm John DeSando.
Classics, let's go to the movies and share some popcorn, soda